All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a huge concept, political maturity. So what does that even mean, right? For a nation to be politically mature? Well, it goes way, way deeper than just, holding elections or having a bunch of political parties. It's really about how a country thinks, how it makes decisions, and ultimately how it behaves as a whole. You can almost think of it like this. An immature nation is a bit like a toddler in a candy store. It's all about grabbing what you want right now. But a mature nation? That's more like an adult who's planting a tree. They're thinking about the future, about long-term growth, and they understand that it takes patience and discipline. Now, to really get to the heart of this, we're going to listen in on a super candid conversation from the island nation of Seychelles. Their own experience, their own discussion, it actually gives us this perfect lens to understand what is, for sure, a universal challenge for every country. Okay, so first things first, we need a way to think about this, a framework. And the conversation we're digging into, it breaks this whole big idea down into three key parts. They're distinct, but as you'll see, they're totally interconnected. And here they are. This is our lens for understanding the whole problem. See, it's not just one thing. It's kind of like a three-part puzzle. You've got the social dimension, that's us, the people. Then there's the governmental dimension, that's the leadership. And finally, the historical one, which is that shared story, the past that shapes absolutely everything. So let's start with that last one, the historical dimension. Let's see how the past in Seychelles is really impacting its political maturity right now. And this is so important. Because a nation's political habits, they don't just appear out of nowhere. Just look at this timeline. You can see right away why building up political experience was so tough. It wasn't some gradual steady evolution. Nope. It was a series of really jarring shifts, from colonial rule to a one-party state, and so on. This kind of history doesn't teach people how to participate from the ground up. Instead, it kind of creates this muscle memory for just waiting for decisions to be handed down from the top. And this quote, wow, it just perfectly captures the results of all that. One speaker in the discussion put it so bluntly. They said, let somebody decide for us, and then we complain. I mean, what a powerful insight, right? It shows you exactly how this history created a culture of, well, passive criticism, where it just feels easier and maybe even safer to stay on the sidelines instead of actually getting in the game. All right, so this historical baggage, it's not just about the public. It also creates this massive dilemma for the leaders themselves. Let's dig into that. So, one of the biggest problems they pointed out in the discussion was this. Leaders get stuck in permanent campaign mode. Think about that. Instead of just focusing on the actual job of governing, their main priority becomes this constant battle to stay in power. And when that happens, everything gets politicized. It just weakens those independent institutions that are supposed to be the bedrock of a mature democracy. And, this next quote from the conversation really just hits you. It captures that deep frustration when it feels like leadership has become all about personal power and ego instead of, the collective good and actually building a better society for everybody. So as you can probably guess, this style of leadership has a direct effect. It's like a mirror reflecting back on the social dimension, on the citizens. The culture of the leadership ends up shaping the entire culture of the nation. And here's what that immaturity actually looks like on the ground. The speakers pointed to some really worrying signs. For one, political debate just stops being about ideas and turns into mudslinging that's more about entertainment. Then you have people getting apathetic, thinking, hey, why should I even bother to vote? And there's this historical shadow, this lingering fear from the one-party state that can still make people afraid to speak out. One speaker came up with just a brilliant analogy for this whole thing. They said politics can become like a contest between sweet shop owners. It is so tempting to vote for the person who's offering you candy right now, those short-term benefits, right? Even if you know those sweets are going to make you sick in the long run. And you ignore the person offering a healthy long-term plan just because it requires a little bit of discipline. Okay, but it wasn't all doom and gloom. The conversation didn't just get stuck on the problems. Once they had all the issues laid out on the table, the discussion turned to solutions, to the big question, how can a nation actively build its political maturity? So they didn't just diagnose the problem, they actually proposed a cure. It's basically a three-pronged attack. First up, education. Start teaching civics and critical thinking in schools, early on. Second, strengthen the pillars of democracy. We're talking about the courts, the civil service. Make them strong enough so they can't be pushed around by politics. And third, build up a media that's focused on informing people with actual facts instead of just fanning the flames of division. And this next idea was one of the most fascinating proposals, I think. A life quality index. Just imagine this, a scorecard with maybe 100 questions that tracks what really matters in life. Questions like, how safe do you feel in your neighborhood? How good is your healthcare? How clean is the environment? This just blows past simple economics, right? It would give citizens a concrete, real tool to measure how the government is actually doing year after year and hold them accountable for real-world results. So when you boil it all down, the biggest takeaway is this. Political maturity is not a spectator sport. It's just not something that happens automatically with time. It's something that has to be built, brick by every single person involved, from the leaders making the big decisions all the way down to the citizens who have to hold them accountable. And that really just leaves us with one final thought, one question for you. Using this exact framework, thinking about the social, the governmental, and the historical dimensions, take a look at your own community or your own country. What signs of maturity do you see, and where do you think there's still room to grow?